Paul Brunton's Spiritual Essentials. Seeking Divine Grace, Quest Series 3, Video 14. Presented by the Paul Brunton Philosophic Foundation. There is a power which inspires the heart, enlightens the mind, and sanctifies our character. It is the power of grace. What is grace? It is the descent of the Overself into the Underself's zone of awareness. It is a visitation of power as unexpected and unpredictable as it is welcome and gratifying. It is an unseen hand stretched forth from the world darkness and amid which we grope with unsteady feet. It is the voice of your soul, the Overself, speaking suddenly out of the cosmic silence with which we are environed. It is like a glorious rainbow of hope, which suddenly appears when all seems lost. The very fact that you have consciously begun the spiritual quest is itself a manifestation of grace, for you have begun to seek the Overself only because the Overself's own working has begun to make it plain to you, through the sense of unbearable separation from it, that the right moment for this has arrived. You should therefore take heart and feel hope. You are not really walking alone. The very love which has awakened within you for the Overself is a reflection of the love which is being shown towards you. You must alter your attitude and habitually look up with love to the Overself. You must become as devoted to it, as attached to it, as you are devoted and attached to nothing else. That power which runs the universal life can also run your personal life, if you will let it think, feel, and act through you. If you can learn to agree, "Thy will be done." The fact is that grace falls from heaven as freely as dew from the sky, but people receive it not. The closer you come to the Overself, the more actively is the grace able to operate on you. The reason for this lies in its very nature, since it is nothing other than a benign force emanating from the Overself. It is always there, but is prevented by the dominance of the animal nature and the ego from entering your awareness. When this dominance is sufficiently broken down, it comes into play more and more frequently, both through glimpses and otherwise. Grace is a powerful stimulus. It descends from a higher source, urges us to perfect our nature, equips us to complete it. Thus we are lifted up to its own higher level. This higher standpoint leads inevitably to a turnabout face, where the energies are directed towards identification with the one infinite mind. The more this is done, the more grace flows by reaction into the self. Whether we are a recipient of the Overself's healing, teaching, or its protective grace, the source remains one and the same. There are little graces, such as those which produce the glimpse, but there is only one great grace. This produces a lasting transformation, a deep, radical healing and permanent enlightenment. As the light of grace begins to fall upon you, you become aware of your tendencies and propensities, the motives and desires which obstruct or oppose the awakening into awareness of the Overself. A student comment.
Following an experience of grace, before meeting PB, I asked him if the negativity had always been there, or if it had just come in. He said no, it had always been there. It was because I had the experience that I then had a place to stand so that I could see all of the darkness and awful stuff, those are my words, that is there in the ego. Grace can come sometimes as a result of past karma, and sometimes it's freely given as a new thing when somebody's in crisis.
The divine grace brings us not what we ask for, but what we need. The two are sometimes the same, but sometimes not. It is only with the wise that they always coincide. With others, they may stand in sharp conflict. Many who ask for grace would be shocked to hear that the troubles which may have followed their request were actually the very form in which the higher power granted the grace to them. There will be moments when a tendency to sin will suddenly be checked by an invading power which will work against the lower will. In the moment that we willingly desert our habitual standpoint under a trying situation and substitute a higher one, in that moment we receive grace. With this reception, a miracle is performed, and the evil of the lower standpoint is permanently expelled from our character. What grace does is to draw your attention away from yourself, from your ego, to the Overself. Grace works magically on you when you open humbly and sensitively to receive it. Then your personal feelings undergo a transformation into their higher impersonal octaves. Then your very weaknesses provoke occasions for gaining effortlessly their opposite virtues. Selfish desires are turned by its alchemy into spiritual aspirations. There is hope for all because there is grace for all. None are so sinful that they cannot find forgiveness, cleansing, and renewal. The discovery that the forgiveness of sins is a sacred fact should fill us with inexpressible joy, for it is the discovery that there is compassionate love at the heart of the universe. How can some separate forgiveness from love? Do they not see a mother forgive her child 100 times, even though she reproves and chastises it? What is needed to call down grace is, first, a humility that is utter and complete, deeply earnest, and absolutely sincere. Secondly, an offering of the self to the Overself, a dedication of earthly being to spiritual essence. And thirdly, a daily practice of devotional exercise. The mysterious intrusion of grace may change the course of events. It introduces new possibilities, a different current of destiny. Paul Brunton, 1898 to 1981, a best-selling British author of a dozen books, spent much of his early life researching the original sacred teachings of Western and Eastern spiritual traditions. He traveled the world to discover and communicate with Christian, Kabbalistic, Vedantic, Buddhist, Taoist, indigenous, and Sufi masters. Blending the richness of his own spiritual experience and inquiry with these ancient and contemporary teachings, he developed a philosophy and path of practice that suits life in the 21st century, one that expresses the greatest wisdom and love available to humankind. Regardless of how it is named, we each have a divine soul, an Overself or higher self, that is with us here and now, waiting to be realized. Paul Brunton's writings are a source of deep spiritual guidance for all those interested in living a divinely inspired life. Anthony Damiani, 1922 to 1984, was a prominent teacher of Paul Brunton's ideas and founder of the Wisdom's Goldenrod Center for Philosophic Studies. Inspired to penetrate into and understand the depths of traditional wisdom, he taught classes on the major philosophies as well as the teachings of Paul Brunton. His dedicated students compiled the 16 volumes of Paul Brunton's posthumous writings, titled The Notebooks of Paul Brunton, available from www.larsonpublications.com. These quotes are taken from The Wisdom of the Overself, Notebooks of Paul Brunton, Volume 3, The Practices for the Quest, Volume 12, Reverential Life, Volume 15, Advanced Contemplation. Series 3 is open-ended, and new videos will continue to be added. Please subscribe to the Paul Brunton Philosophic Foundation channel